Hello, and welcome to The Healing Half. My name is Mickey Spear. I am a musician, author, cat lover, and the host of tonight's show, The Healing Half, which is 30 minutes of growth and learning. And tonight's topic is one that is pertinent to every single person, because whether you have been divorced yourself, odds are you know somebody who has either been divorced or going through a divorce. And so even though on the show I love to talk about grief, we have to talk about grief in all aspects, and it's not just death related. There is losses associated with so much more than just death. Do you agree in the comments section? Just let me know. I'd love to see if you're here, whether you're watching it live as a replay. I always take a look at the comment section. And if you haven't joined my email list yet, please do so. The link is in the comments, wherever that is for you, depending on what device you're watching it on. If you're on my email list, you are going to get the replays of tonight's show, both on Facebook and YouTube, because I know you've got friends who are not on Facebook, and you might really want them to be able to watch this. And then also, you're going to get the notes from tonight's show, as well as so many other great things. So please head to my website if you haven't yet. It's so good to see all of you guys here. And if you are watching it again as a replay, please comment as if you're watching it live, because I go through and I watch them, and I love to see your comments and questions. Before we dive into our amazing guest, Mikosa, who is just out of this world amazing, and I can't wait for you guys to meet her, I do want to share who sponsored our show tonight, because it is so relevant. My good friend, Nancy Holt, wrote a book, which is really hard to do, right? Book writing is hard, and it's called Back Away from the Cookies and Other Life Lessons You Should Know. I was absolutely privileged to be on the launch team of this, which means I got to read it beforehand, and it's so good, you guys. So I'm just going to read you the description really fast. In the comments section, I put the Amazon link. So go check it out. If you have a Kindle or paperback, I think you're just going to love it. It's a humorous and thought-provoking book designed to assure women that they are loved, have a purpose, and can trust God's promises for them. Christian women struggle daily with doubts, decisions, and discouragement, but this book, which is Back Away from the Cookies and Other Stuff You Should Know, is a series of thoughts and short stories that Nancy has put together to help combat that. Nancy is a woman of faith. I loved this book. I think you guys are really going to like it too. So show Nancy some love. Be sure to check out that book if you get a chance, and let me know if you end up buying it and whether you like it. Before we get into our topic, I just wanted to introduce myself one more time. So my name is Mickey Spear. My mom died of cancer when I was 13 years old. I spent the better part of a decade avoiding healing, pretending I was fine, and genuinely convincing myself that I was fine and that I was going to get through it, and this is no big deal. Well, of course, as with any loss, and that goes for divorce too, if you avoid feeling and you avoid those emotions and you just try to pretend you're fine, it's going to eke out in negative ways. The only way through grief is through grief. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. Am I right? I sure hope so. Because for me, that's been this whole mission. Is why did I start the show? Because I wanted to not only share with people what I've learned through lots and lots of counseling and reading once I realized I can't run away from my griefs anymore. And that's where my workbook came from, My Heart Still Remembers. So we'll talk about this a little bit more at the end, but that's where that comes on. It's on my website if you're interested in getting your own copy. But I also wanted to do a show that not only addressed our own wounds and how do I, learn and help other people who are grieving, but I wanted to teach people and learn myself, how do I help people who are in situations I don't understand? So far on the show, we've had so many amazing guest speakers. Tonight is going to be just great too. But we've talked about spouse loss. We've talked about different ways of dying. There's fire, there's suicide. We've talked about disappointment and fear. And there's like way more topics than I can even cover. But so many of those topics, I hope you can't relate to, right? I hope you don't know what it's like to lose a child. I hope you don't know what it's like to lose a spouse. But odds are you know somebody who does. And that's the power of the show is we get to interview people going through it and ask them real questions. So that way, when we know somebody going through it, we have a better understanding of what's going to help. Because the worst thing you can do is nothing. So my hope is that this empowers you to do something when you meet someone going through a hard time. So tonight, I am so honored and privileged to welcome the one, the only Mikosa Taylor.
Hi, how are you?
I am so good. I am just so, you are just a ball of sunshine. So I'm so excited to have you on the show. And you're wearing yellow of all colors.
I love yellow.
It's perfect.
It's my theme color. Everybody that does know me on a personal basis says, "Oh, you got more yellow in your life." I was like, "Why would I? Yellow is not sad. Yellow, it makes me happy." So,
yay, that's awesome. Well, Mikosa, we are so grateful to have you on the show tonight, and we've got lots of listeners watching live. So before we hear your story and get to dive in, I just want to ask the audience really fast, just yes or no. Have you either been divorced or do you know someone in your close circle who has?
Yeah.
Just a quick yes or no. I can't wait to see all of that come in. And don't forget, Mikosa's contact information is in that comment section. So right where you're about to type yes or no, make sure you click on our website after the show too. So Mikosa, as we're hearing back and waiting to hear from people on whether this is a relatable story for them, I know it is for me for sure. Do you mind just giving us a little bit more about yourself and kind of what maybe the high level of your divorce?
yeah, I absolutely would love to do that. We'll just start with the basics. I originally, I'm not from the United States. I moved to the States when I was probably right around 5 or 6, to Wichita, Kansas. I don't know if there's anybody online that's from Kansas, but I lived there by Kansas and grew up. I grew up in an area that had a lot of churches. We call it the Bible Belt. Most of the time it comes alive during election season. They talk about the Bible Belt. I grew up in farm country / Bible Belt. And so that's my foundations about family, about how that works, all come from that. And then on top of that, the area we live in was a Mennonite Brethren area. And I don't know if you know a lot about them. They're similar to the Amish, but they drive cars, Oldsmobiles, they wear regular clothes, but they're very grounded in like who God is and what he's about, and have a lot, like faith guides a good chunk of what they do. So just some foundational pieces that kind of, because I always say when it comes to divorce, there's things that guide you in it. My thing that guides me is going to be my relationship with Jesus, and that's I don't know how to do this outside of that. So I'll share my experience from that space. Yeah, I got married when I was 20, which seems really young for our Minnesota listeners, but for everyone else outside of that area, I was an old maid when I got married. I went to a great school that was like an NAI Division II school, and so it was like one of those little schools where they had the room before spring, and like most juniors and seniors were engaged / married. I just waited till I graduated at 20 and then got married to the best person I could choose with what I had at the time. I transplanted myself and moved to Minnesota, which is actually Duluth. I should say Duluth because it's really far up there, which is about 2 hours south of the border of Canada. And I realized that marriage was really hard. And not that I didn't know that marriage was hard before. I think I just had some very idealistic ideas of what I thought marriage should look like. I had idealistic ideas of what I thought a spouse should be and their roles. I had ideas about what I should be doing and how I should be rewarded it was just, I came into this marriage thing with a whole lot of junk. And that's really normal for most people. But that is that case. we struggled in every part of marriage the entire time. So
Mm.
it was never like this really easy thing for me, but I'm a commitment person. And so I believe in the sanctity of marriage. And I'm very like, much that if I'm committing no matter what. And so, you know, as people would like talk about marriages, be like, our honeymoon, I'd be like, my marriage is really hard. And I just got very used to living what I call two lives, which would be the life that I created, you know, with my spouse, and then the other part, which I created to like deal with all the stuff I wasn't getting in marriage or all the things that I wasn't doing in marriage. And so I always say my other person that I deeply loved was being involved in the church and like leading people and being in businesses and starting new things. And so for me, the overarching theme about marriage and about what that meant for me was discovery and understanding and knowing of myself. And so I was married for a total of 13 years. And at 13 years, my husband decided, hey, I don't want to be married anymore, which is like a hard day. If you've been divorced, you know that day. It's the day when all of a sudden you're like, what just happened? And it wasn't a conversation necessarily with him. It was he had made a decision and I had to just kind of figure it out. And I did that hard thing of fighting, right? Because I'm going to fight for something, because sometimes your partner makes decisions and you're like, I don't know that I believe that, right? Like you might just be having a bad day or a bad month, you know? And I fought probably for a good solid about year and a half, you know, or probably a year. And then after we'd done everything we knew how to do, it was like, this isn't working. And what I thought was going on is totally not what's going on. What he thought was going on is totally not what's going on. And I remember feeling like I failed at something. Like I put all this effort into something and I failed at something. And why can't I just get this right? Right? Like, why couldn't I just get this right? I can help other people with this, but I can't get it for myself. Right? So that would be like an overarching view of a little bit of like what divorce looked like for me. And there's lots of levels to that, right? Every divorce has different levels and different things to where you are. But I mean, overall, I always say, like, you know, when I think about my ex-husband, I don't hate him. I'm not like angry with him. I chose the best thing for me at the time. The difference is that like I just kept growing, right? And he was like, I want to grow. I just don't want to grow with you, which is you can't make people do things that they're not ready to do. You just can't. You can be the most charismatic person that you want to be, but if they're not ready to fight with you, you can't do marriage by yourself. You just can't do that. So then we went through the process of getting divorced, which is traumatic for those people that know that. We also had a kid, which is a whole different deal, co-parenting, traumatic. And we are on the other side of that. You know, I'm now almost 5 years out of my divorce, and probably like 6 or 7. And so I feel like I'm finally back into a different space where I'm not in the trauma and I'm not angry and I'm not, you know, like we're just trying to figure out how to do life and COVID and, you know, kid stuff and all those things. But yeah. Did that answer your question, Elena?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. I love the background and with whether we're talking about divorce or last week we had a cancer patient on, and I loved your disclaimer about like, this is my story, but that doesn't mean it's your story. So I love that.
Yeah.
So thank you. And I really appreciate your insight on, like you said, there's so many misconceptions out there, but I think the main one that you kind of said was he just walked up to you and said, I want a divorce. And I know there are people watching who've either had that exact conversation or we're on the other side of that conversation, or they've got a friend that was in that conversation too. And it's like, there's no choice in that. Like when somebody's leaving you, this is not a choice. And that kind of leads me to my next question.
Okay.
There's a lot of negative stereotypes about divorce, and you've already kind of hit on some of them. People say it's quitting, that you should have worked harder, it's unchristian, and there's a lot of shame and guilt surrounding that. And I was just wondering, you know, the old saying goes, and I say this all in the time on my show, Maybe it's not an old saying. I'm not sure if I came up with it or what. I won't take credit for it though. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's easy. And we
Yeah.
know half of marriages result in divorce, and yet it's still one of those things we're kind of awkward and we've got shame and judgment towards. So do you mind kind of walking us through some of the emotions that you either heard people say to you or that you felt that just aren't true about people
Yeah.
who get divorced?
Yeah. And I think I'm gonna step back even a little bit further, because I think the foundation of this is, who am I and who do I think that I am? Because that's the real reality. I think a lot of times we choose to get married because we meet somebody that's exciting, right? And you're having all this fun, and that's supposed to happen. But I also think that sometimes when we're not getting something, we get that from other people, right? Like if there's something we're not good at, we're naturally attracted to people sometimes that are better at it, and then we expect them to fill that need for us. And so when I think about what you're saying, Mickey, just about the shame and some of the things that are tied into that, I think they're very much tied into our self-worth, our confidence, and who we are and who, like, God says we are. Because I think when we have a really firm foundation with those things, then as those words come flying at us, they may still hurt, but they don't stick. The hurt and the pain of that stuff doesn't go away. How we respond to that, how we handle those moments, I think, and how we even interact with those people after those moments, I think has to do with our own self-worth. Like, what's going on between our head and our heart, and we really love ourselves, you know. And so to answer the question that you actually asked me on top of that, yeah, I think that a lot of times, you know, I was on staff in a church, you know. So when I was going through my divorce, there were a lot of people involved, you know. I was on staff at a church. The church was pretty large, and I chose to live that part of my life publicly. I just felt like, I don't know how to do this other than to just do this publicly. And so a lot of what I had to do when I was getting divorced was pastor people through my divorce, which was exhausting. Like, I just feel so bad. I always call it the weird grocery store thing. If you're divorced or in the process of being divorced, there's like 3 places you avoid: the grocery store, mall, and any long lines that you have to talk to people for long periods of time, because people don't know what to say. And when people don't know what to say, they say really awkward things. It's very similar to death. Like, I'm sure, like, as you were even at your mom's funeral, people would just say the most ridiculous things. And it's not because they mean to, it's just because they don't know what to do in that moment. And they look at you and they're like, I don't know if she's going to cry, or she's going to be sad, or I'm freaking out, I don't know what to say. So they just say things. They say all of those little, like, I call them Christianese / slang things, like, oh, one day you'll find your person, or, oh, you know, I feel so bad for you. Well, I don't feel bad for myself right now. Like, why do you feel bad? And even to the point that, like, I just think in general, people don't like conflict. So when you're talking about your conflict, I mean, you've either experienced one or two things: the person that's very angry, very bitter about divorce, and the person that's like actually okay, but people are like, you need to be angrier, right? And so it's kind of those two realms. What I have found is that a lot of what people say is not necessarily like to hurt us. A lot of what people say is their own awkwardness with the situation. As in, I don't know what to say. And sometimes I tell my friends, I'd be like, when I tell you things and you're not really quite sure what to say, just say, hey, I hear you, but I don't actually know what to say. That is the most loving thing you could say to somebody. You don't have to, like, you don't have to come up with fancy things. People just like to be heard. And I also just got really good at saying, I'm telling you this. I don't need your advice. I don't need you to tell me what to do. This is a tell. I'm just telling you this. I'm telling you this because I'm choosing to be accountable to my relationships and my friendships. Like, this is something I'm feeling. This is something that's hurting me. And I have a counselor. They help with counseling. I have, like, pastoral staff. They help me spiritually. I'm just coming to you as a friend, and I just need you to hear something. And I think, like, I got really good at positioning my statements and saying, I'm telling you, or if I said, I'm asking you this question, I'd like some feedback, because you have to protect your heart in those moments, because it's hard. It's really hard stuff. Super hard stuff.
Everybody's got an opinion, especially with divorce. I'm sure everybody wants to know the story. Everybody's got an opinion, but you don't know anything. So I love that, where you just kind of start out, just be like, by the way, I'm telling you this, but I'm not really looking for any advice right now. It might sound awkward when we say it in this context, but if somebody told you that, you'd be like, okay, I'm not going to give any advice. And I love that. So you hit exactly on one of the things I was actually going to ask in regards to the people like myself, who's not necessarily, my dad's been divorced, but I haven't really gone through that. I haven't gone through that. My mother-in-law's watching like, what? Is there something you did to tell me? No. But when we see somebody at the grocery store, and we've known through the grapevine, for whatever reason, we know they're going through a divorce, what helped? Where you're like, wow, thank you. That soothed my soul, versus what hurt, where you're like, oh my gosh, please never say that to anyone again. And if you could just give us a couple examples of each, so that way we're taking mental notes, that would be great.
Yeah. So, I literally, I think I put a post up. Maybe I'll see if I can find the post and I'll repost it for people. But I put this post up that was like practical things you can do when people are in crisis that are helpful. I always tell people, you don't need to bring it up unless they bring it up. Just don't. You don't have to. Like, everything burning inside of you as you're walking down that aisle, like, oh my God, I just want her to know. People in general want to be seen. Does that make sense? They want to be heard. And grocery stores are normally not the place to do that. So when I think of that, the best way that people have loved me is, I remember I was at the grocery store and a lady walked up to me and she was like, hey, I know there's a lot of things going on. Here's a $5 Starbucks card. So beautiful. Such a beautiful thing to do. It's not a lot. You're already going through the aisle anyway. I mean, like, I'm always like, I can afford a $5 drink for somebody. But like, I carry around stuff like that, because sometimes you're walking down the aisle or the hall, right, or of the grocery store, and you see that mom that's like having a full-on meltdown because her kid is on the floor, and so it's just like one of the things that I do. When I see my friends that are going through that, I am the person that says, hey, if you just don't want to be alone, you're always welcome to come hang out. Leave it at that. Don't shove them into it. Don't do any of that. People get to decide how they're going to handle this. Sometimes that was like the big thing for me. Like, on a Saturday night, I just wanted to not be by myself, And so I had friends that would just be like, hey, we're having this bonfire and we're not going to talk anything about your life. Do you want to come? And I'd be like, we're going to have fun? Yes. Yes, I want to come every time. And so I would say, be practical. Do something to make you happy. So if you would like to have a really intimate conversation about your personal life, I don't suggest doing it with other people. And also just be understanding of their journey. Like, I was getting divorced, but there's two people in a divorce. My ex-spouse lived in the same community as me. And I very much wanted to honor his part of the story. And so, like, to bash him wasn't like the greatest thing for me, because my kid is deeply and madly in love with her dad. Right. And so, like, I just was like, I'm just not going to do that. I mean, we have our beefs. We have our beefs and we have our stuff, but I have a kid and I just need him to be there and show up, right, and be a really good dad to her. So for me, so sometimes every person like walks into this space completely different, but these are my favorite. $5 gift cards. I literally, every time I go to the grocery store, I grab like Starbucks, Caribou, leave them in my purse. If I know someone that's doing that, I use this really great, crazy app called ink.com, and it sends them a gift card. I just send them a gift card. I ask them for their address and send them a card. Handwritten notes. I remember some of the handwritten notes that people who had been divorced, they were so encouraging, because in that moment too, you don't necessarily want to hear from your married friends who are super happy in their relationships. You want to hear from people that you want to hear from people that have walked through it, and that, like, I look for people that walk through it and look the way I wanted to look at the end of it. Yeah. Right? I didn't want to be angry and really frustrated. I wanted to be like living life and having a vibrancy about me, and like I wanted to see like I wanted to see myself change. I'm like, if this is going to cause this much pain in my life, and I cannot get around the pain, like you said, Nikki, I can't get around the pain. I have to go through the pain. It better be worth it. And my life better look radically different than it did before. And so I just believe in being super practical. I mean, everybody does things differently. I'm just like, oh, you haven't eaten? I'm going to send a meal via DoorDash. I'm not going to show up at your house because you don't actually want to talk to me. I'm just going to send you food or a gift certificate, or send me your Amazon list and I'll randomly send you things when I remember it. Those are all things that are just like, if you've ever been on the other end of those gifts, you're always like, oh my gosh, and I went to the mail and I got this box and it was the thing. I mean, like, it's just, we're like little kids. We love experiencing joy. We love to see that people see us. We don't always really want to explain all that, but like, you can be so present and so practical in how you love people in this step and this stage. And if they want more, they'll tell you, they'll just spew it out and so like, oh, that bad. but yeah, that's kind of what I found, is that practical, loving people, guest cards, helping them with that. If their finances completely change, like a gift certificate to Target so they get groceries. One of my girlfriends is going through a divorce right now, and I was like, how can I practically love her? And I was like, oh, she's always posting about going to this hair salon, and I was like, I just booked her a time for a hair salon. Why? Because every person wants to get a haircut after they get divorced and look pretty and do that kind of stuff. Or if it's like, hey, we just want to hang out, you just invite people into community in that space, because they normally are wanting some type of community. You may not be the community they choose, but the invitation is always noticed and recognized.
Oh, that's so amazing. I cannot wait to go back through, take all our notes, and share that with my email list. So again, one more time, people, if you are not on my email list, you got to head to mickyspear.com, because all these things that she's talking about, I'm going to list them out for you and have the replay link. So you can send this to your friend on YouTube or Facebook, whichever you prefer. But Mikosa, those were amazing and so touching, and your heart. And I know, like, you hopefully know this in your soul, but you are so special, and your like love of God and the desire to not bash your ex-husband is Jesus coming through you, and that's really hard. I don't think
really hard.
that's really hard. So wow, thank you for your example and your heart. I do want to transition to the losses of grief and kind of wrap it up there, and then let you talk about a little bit what you do and how people on the show can listen to you. So quick pause. Everybody watching, I see there's lots of you here, and it's so great to have you. Mikosa mentioned these little gifts of kindness. Can you give us some examples in the comment section? Just think about it on your own. Whether you're going through a divorce or a death loss or anything, what's like something somebody gave you that you could easily have afforded yourself? Easily, like a $5 gift card. But you're like, wow, that really hit home. I would love to just hear your guys' examples so that we can take what Mikosa said plus what you guys said and put that into the email. But while you guys are doing that, we're going to ask our last question. Since we talk about grief on the show like it's my day job, it is my job. But bad joke. Anyways, we do talk about grief a lot, and I want to talk about the losses that come with divorce, because there are so many that the average person walking through the grocery store isn't thinking about. It's so easy. There's loss privilege. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. My mom died when I was 13. So for me, people are really, thank you, but they're really sympathetic to me. And I don't have to explain anything to anybody. There's no guilt. There's no shame. There's nothing I did. And people just, very kindly, they just feel really bad for me. And I'm the very grateful recipient of that. But I understand not every loss is treated that way. And I feel like divorce is one of those ones that people, again, they just got this skepticism and this judgment towards, which hopefully we can all get rid of. But there are so many losses associated with that we have to be kind and extra aware of when we're talking to someone going through a divorce. So do you mind just sharing with us some of the losses as you're seeing this unravel in front of you, that you're like, oh my gosh, this is happening?
I'm going to talk about it in a context of care. And I was with a mentor, and he was like explaining this to me, and I was like, that is what happened. So I'm going to talk about the different kinds of relationships that you have, right? And I'm going to talk about it in a Christian context because I think it's easy. One, pastoral relationship, right? These are people that are in your life. They may know like 20% of your life, like Mikosa does this, and she also like got divorced, and she they might know like some details. I always say anything that I would share from a stage, that's a pastoral relationship for me. Okay. Then the next stage is your mentorships. And those are people that you'd invite maybe to your house, maybe not. Maybe they know a little bit deeper about your family. They might have met some of your family. You would invite them to your wedding, you know, like it's a little bit of a smaller group. And then there's your actual friends. And that is a really small amount, especially if you're in a leadership position or leading people, that is a lot smaller amount. And those are the people that know you. They're the people that you sit when, you know, I always call it between the 9 and 10, we call it the golden hour in leadership. So people that you talk to between 9 and 10 p.m., if you would not talk to them, they're not your friends. They're needing something from you. Okay. So when I think about the loss and divorce, I think about it in that way. I think you very quickly realize who are your friends, who are your mentors, and who are you pastoring. And each of those groups come back towards you in a very different manner as they experience divorce. So when I talk about being in a church and people, I have to pastor people through my divorce because they were just like, that shouldn't happen. Those are the people I pastor, right? And so the biggest loss, I think, for me was just the reality of my relationships. I am an extrovert. I don't know if you guys are Enneagram people. I'm an Enneagram 3. I like to get things done. This is why we're friends. I like to get things done. I like to be accomplished, and I like to I enjoy community, and I got a little wing of it too. So I really, really love hosting and community, and so I love cultivating cultures that are intimate, right? And so if I say, I mean, we're friends for life. That's the commitment. And like my girlfriends would laugh and say, you were the weirdest person, because we had this, I remember having a conversation with you, and I was like, it's fine if you don't want to be my friend, but if we're going to be friends, this is what it looks like, and here's my expectation. And Mickey's laughing, but that's how I roll, right? Like I don't want fake relationships. I want intimate relationships with real people that I can do life with. So I used to say that I had a million friends, and what it really turned out as I got divorced is I realized I actually had a lot of people I pastored, a couple mentors here and there, and my friends were the ones that were kind of like my safe space, my area, and my place. And a lot of my hurt often would come when I would have interactions with people and I'd misclassify them. So I would tell, for example, someone I pastored something, I would tell my friend, like, I'm really frustrated about this. And that would be okay, but they couldn't actually handle my brokenness. They couldn't handle my response because I'm pastoring them and I'm leading them. Therefore, I can't have any failure. I can't have any space. And if you think about it, like if you think about it in a church context, we do this with leaders in general. Like we can even say the president. We have a very different expectation of our leadership than we do our mentors, than we do of our friends. Does that make sense? And a lot of my hurt happened in that space. When I would misclassify, or I wasn't necessarily sure what our relationship looked like, so it sounded like I was either oversharing, or I was giving my pearls to swine, or I was trying to get my needs met from people that just couldn't meet my needs. You know, and I think when you don't know who you are, and you're trying to figure out who you are, and you're trying to heal, and you're trying to like be okay, and you're trying to work, and you're trying to do those things, and then you have to not classify, but you have to like think about who you're sharing with. Sometimes that was like some of the most painful conversations that I have had, because my expectation was this friendship relationship, like very sweet spot, and what I got back was pastoral condemnation, like, I can't believe you would struggle with that. And they weren't doing it to be mean. That was just their expectation of me, you know? And so if I was, you know, in divorce, you're your most vulnerable state, is what I always say when you're healing, right? And it takes us a long time to heal. I think my counselor said for every year you're divorced, you need 12 no, for every year you're divorced, something like you need like 2 months to heal or something like that. So I was married for 13 years. I needed like 3 years. So the beginning of me getting divorced versus the version you see now are very different versions and different things. And the more I got to know myself, the more I became okay with who I was. And then I wasn't like doing all this reaching out to the wrong people or finding, I was like, oh, wait, if I'm really feeling bad, I need to go to my friends, right? I go to my counselor and I get my counseling. I go to church and I experience God and I have this moment with him. And then I get to go to my friends and be like, how do I do that? Like, like, how do I do that? And the advice that I get from them is because they love me. They're for me. They want the best in me. But a lot of my pain, I would say, was that, number one. Number two, you lose a family in this process. Every about divorce is loss. There's not, like, you can't get out of divorce and not experience loss. That's just not going to happen. And so the biggest pain is that I spent 13 years highly involved in deeply loving people, right? And when you get divorced, people have to choose sides, and that can be incredibly painful. And they're still like, it's not that they're stopping me from seeing them. That's not it. But I think in order for me to move forward and in order for me to grow, I had to put some like boundaries up to give myself the space to even understand, what do I look like outside of this marriage now? What do I look like as Mikosa? What does God want for me in this season? And I can always come back to those relationships, right? 13 years as an aunt is 13 years as an aunt, like some of these little kids that but it's like, am I willing to like hold those relationships open-handedly? And as doors close and slam in your face and you're like, what just happened? I thought we were friends. Like, will I let go the things that need to be let go? And will I just trust that God is going to meet my needs in all of those relationships? So everything that you lose comes back. It just looks different, right? And so am I willing and I'm okay to let go of that portion of it? Am I willing and okay to let go of the pain or the things? It's hard. And it's not just hard for me. The final loss is for your immediate family, because they honestly do it with you. They experience the divorce with you. You might be doing it every day, but my parents, who I love deeply, like, are still grieving some of this loss. They're still walking through that because they fell in love with this boy I brought home, right? That they saw 2 or 3 times a year. And so it is a lot of loss. And so, like, even in that, like, my sister's on and we were talking about this over Christmas, like, you just don't realize the amount of loss that there is, like the amount of little things. Like, I remember we were talking about, my wedding picture was up and I was dating my current husband, and I came home and I like talked to my mom, who my mom is awesome, but I talked to my mom and said, Mom, I really need you to take that down, right? Like a total legitimate mom thing. Moms keep those pictures on the mantle. Everybody knows this, or dads do this. They put it on the mantle and it's there for life. And she was just like, oh my gosh, I totally didn't even, but I don't have a picture of you. And I was like, I just need you to take it down. And she was like, but that's a memory, like you just realize that the loss isn't just with you, it's with your whole community. It changes the whole community. And it doesn't always mean that it's going to look the same, and maybe it'll come back around and maybe not, but there's just a loss. There's always this loss. And so you get very good at being transitional. You get very good at choosing to let go. You get really good at choosing not to always know what's going to happen in the end. And you get very good at knowing yourself, and that's the big part of it, is if you can know yourself. That's the biggest part of it. That's my saving grace, is when things come my way now, I'm like, ooh, it doesn't really sound like me. I'm going to have to say no to that.
Yeah. Oh, that is so amazing, Mikosa. I wish we had more time. We're just going to have you back on the show, because I know this is like one of a billion topics you are really, really, really well versed in. So Thank you so much for being here. I'm sorry about that wedding photo. That's hilarious, but so sad. Thank you so much for sharing. One of the things I did ask leading up to our episode, I put your picture like on my email, and I was just basically like, hey, if you've been divorced, what would you like us to know? So a lot of them, what they sent me back was stuff you already covered. His family, your friends kind of
Yeah.
have to choose. Your parents, the dreams was the one thing that also came back, was just you're grieving what you thought was going to happen. And you had this life built up in your head that all of a sudden is not going to look the way you wanted it to.
Yeah.
And so, thank you so much for sharing yours, and for everybody watching the replay who helped me do some prep work on this. I really appreciate that too.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, do you mind telling these people how they can get in touch with you afterwards?
Yeah.
And why would somebody want to do that? Because I think you all should, but I'll let Mikosa explain that herself.
Well, I think, your experiences like draw some strengths out of you too. And so, my life was really hard for a long time. And I was like, I don't even understand why this is happening. This is terrible. Everything about this is absolutely terrible. Why is it happening to God? One of the things that's been really great is I have stepped into a role of coaching people. Some people through the midst of divorce, but also just coaching people about confidence. I'm a professional confidence business coach. And so we talk a lot about who are you inside all of these things, because when you're running a business or when you're running your life, if you don't know who you are, it's really hard to know what you're supposed to do. And so you just make these decisions based off of what you feel for the day, and then you highly regret them because you're like, that was terrible. I'm never doing that again. And there is something that happens in us when we know who we are, we know what we're for, and we know what we're created to do. And it's in that order. We do need to know who we are first. Therefore, we can know what we're for. Therefore, we then can know what we need to do. And so I work with clients all the time that are maybe they've been in a business, maybe they wanted to start a dream, maybe they're like really tired because COVID has been really hard. And they're just at this place where they want to move forward. There's something they wanted to do. They can't get to that point from A to B, and they want to move forward in that. And I coach people and teach them to do that. And I do that online. We also do it through some online courses that we have. And then I also just do a lot of consulting work in the area of diversity. And what does it look like to be a person that looks like me in that same space, walking out something that maybe I don't understand the ending to. And so I always say coaching was one of those things that really changed my life. It's something that, like, as I was getting divorced, that really made all the difference, because I needed someone to sit there and just say, we're not going to focus on all of that. We're going to focus on what you feel like you're called to do. You feel like you're called to coach people? Let's sit down and talk about that. Let's make a plan for that. Let me encourage you in that, and it's different than counseling. It is not a counselor. They're very different, I would say. But I would say that if you're at a spot where you wanted to do something and you just keep hitting a wall, whether it's marketing or it's just too hard, or I'm exhausted, I'm just really tired and I can't think anymore. That's what I do. And so I do that. And I have a coaching business called Mikosa Taylor Coaching, which you put up in the side. And then we were just giggling about this. I also have, I'm an entrepreneur, so I like doing things. And I also have a little clothing store where I have a lot of the sayings we learned from coaching that we put on clothes, because sometimes you have to remember who we are, and the words remind us. And so I have these shirts sometimes that I have to walk around saying, like, be hopeful. Oh, right, that's right. I need to be hopeful about life. Or I need to be brave right now. I always say I need to be brave and put my big girl panties on, and I got to do the thing that scares the heebie-jeebies out of me, because it's going to make me grow. It's going to make me be who I'm created to be. This is on the path of that. And so that's what I do on my daily basis. And I absolutely would love chatting with any of you. Mickey, of course, also has my contact information. And then if you also follow me on Instagram, I will make sure that I post up that list of great ways to love people when they're in pain, and I will send it to Mickey. And if you haven't subscribed to her email, you should, because there's lots of great tips on there. You really should. So, and Mickey, we can do this again. I actually had tons of fun doing this.
You are welcome back anytime. So let's for sure do that. So Mikosa, thank you so much for your heart, for sharing, for being vulnerable, and for teaching us
Absolutely.
wisdom-packed episode. If you're still watching and you thought this was a wisdom-packed episode, just put wisdom-packed in the comment or something like that. I just want you to see all these people who are so in love with your story, so you can be affirmed that you just got to keep going. So thank you so much for being here. Always
Thank
great
you.
to talk with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You guys, wow, what an episode. I am buzzing because I know I get to go back through, read all of your comments. So hello, thank you so much again for sticking with me and watching this, whether it's live or as a replay. If you make it to the end, you're my favorite people, right? I just can feel in my veins there is something really special that happened with Mikosa's story, and that it, not that we need to get too cosmic about it, but I know there's people listening who were impacted and powerfully, whether you're like me and you just learned a lot of little things. I'm gonna go buy some $5 gift cards. I don't know about you, or you've been through divorce, and whether it looks the same or different, to know that you're not alone. You are not a quitter. You are not a bad person. You are not a Christian. There are people in your corner who are rooting for you, who believe in you, regardless of whether you have been divorced or not. And last but certainly not least, if you are one of those people who are going through divorce, or it's been a while and maybe you haven't really sat down and processed that, I would just encourage you to give that divorce, or maybe you were a child of a divorce, or whatever it is, give that event some space this week. Really sit and go through, what did life look like before, during, and after, and what were the losses that you experienced, and give each of those losses time to just feel, and to hopefully, as we kind of said a couple times, go through them. I have a thing that we talked about in several episodes called the T chart. I'll explain it in my follow-up email, and that can hopefully help you kind of wade through some of those decisions. And as with all loss, it's oftentimes cumulative. So if you also are going through some divorce stuff and it starts to spark this chain reaction of events, you're not crazy. That's normal. And if one of those losses is grief loss, don't forget to check out my booklet, My Heart Still Remembers. I am so excited about this book. I did it recently. My grandma's angelversary, year 1, is coming up. And so I did that recently with her and sobbed the whole time, but in the best of ways. And I just hope that for all of you, whether you're grieving someone who passed away this year, or it's been 20, 40 years, your heart still remembers. And I hope that this book helps you wade through that and feel so much more at peace. Because if you're like me, those memories, those feelings, they're knocking. We're just actively oftentimes choosing not to open that door. And this book hopefully will allow you to open the door, invite them to the table, have those conversations with those memories, regrets, hopes and dreams, all those things, and then send them peacefully on their way. So thank you all so much for being here. It's an absolute honor. Next week, my wonderful mother-in-law, Tammy, is going to be on to share her powerful, tragic story, and I'll let her do that herself, of the loss of her son, Brendan. So be sure to check in next week. It's going to be phenomenal. And Mikosa, again, thank you so much for being here. Goodbye, everyone.